One of the most iconic lines from Halo comes from Halo 2 when the Master Chief says, "I need a weapon." So that got us thinking, can you beat Halo 1, 2, and 3 without a weapon? Or at least without shooting a single shot? Well, today we decided to embark on this quest and find out definitively, once and for all, can you beat Halo without shooting? Let's get into it. As we look at the first Halo game, we knew that this would kind of be one of the interesting ones to look at right away, and Pillar of Autumn actually is relatively easy to make your way through without firing a single shot. It's definitely one of those point A and point B levels, and fortunately you can just bash your way past any enemies or just run by them and hope that they don't kill you. We actually beat this first level no problem, and we're feeling pretty optimistic about the run for Halo CE. We went to the level Halo next, and honestly, after you punch your way past the first wave of the firefight, you can just drive through majority of the level, take out some enemies by either splattering them or punching them, and try not to run over your teammate in the process. And I think this level was a good indicator that the Warthog levels for the most part will be something that we can manage. But when we got to Truth and Reconciliation, we did realize early on that the beginning section of the level was quite challenging just because there's a lot of enemies in different directions, and especially when you get into the inside part, you have to look out and you kind of have to jump around and panic a little bit, but ultimately we made it through Truth and Reconciliation alright also. Silent Cartographer is actually a level where you can get an achievement if you do this on solo without shooting, and since we already knew the routes for this one, it was pretty straightforward to get through this level, except I do have to say at the end there is a sword elite, and once again he will track you down and chase you if you're not careful, and that's probably the biggest risk you have on Silent Cartographer. Assault in the Control Room is a long level, and honestly we just ran through and punched everything and just tried to get through everything as quickly as we could. We managed to jump over the bridge to skip a section of the level, which was pretty nice. However, as we approached the back half of Halo CE, things started to get a little bit more challenging. When we got to 343 Guilty Spark, we did notice there were several sections where the Flood would rush at you, especially when you first encounter the Flood, and you have to hold out and kill all the Flood before the next wave of Flood will come out and eventually open up the door you can exit through. But since we can't shoot our weapons, taking out the smaller Flood forms would be a little bit more challenging, except ultimately we realized since we were doing this run on easy that we could just let them eat us and we usually wouldn't die. So we kind of just let them eat us and then they would explode in the process. That was one way to solve that. When the larger Flood forms would eventually come in, we were relieved that at least in Halo 1 we're able to punch our way through them, even though they're much harder than fighting through the Covenant, and honestly you can get stuck indoors and be killed really easily, and this was pretty frustrating because it happened to both of us at times. The library, being the fan favorite Halo level in the Halo universe, was just as fun as always, especially because we couldn't shoot and this whole level is based around firefights, so a lot of the time we were either waiting around just bashing our way through the Flood and throwing grenades and dodging the enemy attacks, or we were getting lost and walking in circles because since we spent so much time trying to skip fighting the Flood, we would sometimes backtrack to where we started from thinking that we were going the right way because there were still Flood in that area. When we finally reached 2 Betrayals, this level also ended up being somewhat challenging as we got back into the main bridge room that is kind of indoors connecting the 2 canyons together. This section was really difficult because pretty much there is a ton of Flood blocking the door and you have to clear them out before making your way forward. Then you have to pair that with the fact that you're in a really wide open space, which means that you can't really throw grenades and corner the Flood, and some of them have rocket launchers, and this is where we died quite a few times trying to figure it out. And honestly, the solution we came up with was that if you go up to the door button enough times, eventually it actually works. So either we weren't pressing the button hard enough or believing the door would open enough, but finally after trying the door several times it did open, and then we just ran away and hoped that we didn't get shot by the rocket Flood. Getting into the level keys, while this level is possible to beat without shooting, it definitely was more challenging than other levels just because of the high saturation of enemies throughout this level. There's so many Flood that you have to run by, and holding out at the grav lift when you don't have any weapons to shoot with is super difficult and challenging as the enemies will swarm at you and you just have to hope you time your grenades correctly and that the grav lift actually lifts you up and puts you in the level quick enough. enough. Then when you're in the inside section of this level, you have a lot of tight corridors and enemies around every turn, and honestly, we had to do just a lot of sprinting, jumping, and dodging to hope that the flood wouldn't kill us. One of the more challenging levels, but it is still possible. And then getting on to the Maw, this level actually wasn't too bad for the most part. The only challenging thing was getting the ventilators grenaded at the right time because you're getting shot at by sentinels constantly and the flood's jumping on you, so it's easy to get knocked down and killed. But if you manage to stay on and you blow up the ventilators, you can get onto the driving section, and honestly, the driving section you don't have to shoot on anyways. So we made it through Halo Combat Evolved without shooting, and we were pretty proud of ourselves, but we knew we had a bigger feat ahead of us, that we had to beat the entire Halo trilogy. So we moved forward onto Halo 2 to see if it's possible to beat Halo 2 without shooting a weapon. And upon playing through Cairo Station, we realized that Halo 2 is very, very boring if you're not allowed to shoot your gun. But still, we made our way through Cairo Station, punching our ways to each room, and in most sections of this level, you have to kill all the enemies before the door opens up, which could be kind of frustrating having to backtrack and find whichever enemy straggler is left behind to punch. And the section with the buggers flying through the air is a little bit more challenging as they are more difficult to melee, but eventually you can kill them and make your way through this complete level. The next level, Outskirts, is a little bit easier though because you can pretty much fly through it by jumping across the buildings at the beginning, and then we can jump on a ghost and just drive to the end of this level. Metropolis, on the other hand, was pretty easy at the beginning. We just kind of drove through, and honestly, the Marines were pretty fun in the Gauze Cannon, just going to town fighting off the Covenant. When we got to the Scarab, this was one part we knew from the beginning of this challenge would probably be one of the harder points, but other than us not jumping on the Scarab correctly, we were able to board the Scarab relatively easy, punch the enemies as they jumped out towards us, and then when we got inside the Scarab, we made it a point to quickly kill the elites before they would pull their swords out, which probably would have been the biggest risk on this level. As we switched to the level The Arbiter, we finally had sword technology and invisibility, which made honestly this run so much better, being able to swing your sword. The level The Arbiter is relatively easy, especially with the help of the sword since the level's kind of built for stabbing. We came into a really big challenge, however, when we got to the level The Oracle, the following level. And honestly, the elevator section of this level is so challenging to get through without shooting, as the flood is constantly dropping, you have to worry about the sentinels shooting at you, and when you're relying on your sword, if you swing, Halo 2 physics kick in and sometimes lunge you way up in the air or off of the elevator platform, causing you to die. And if you're not careful, you can easily be killed by either the flood or the sentinels, and slashing our way through this one really wasn't an option, and we had to decide what was more important, using our sword at times or meleeing with a gun, hoping that it would do enough damage to keep us alive to begin with. Fortunately enough, after enough trial and error, we did get through this level as well, but this was definitely the most challenging level we had done so far. On Delta Halo, we really didn't have anything to worry about. We just kind of drove through the whole first section of the level and then just walked through the second half. The only risky part was at the end of the level, right before the cutscene shows. You have to fight against some honor guards, which of course can be risky if they have a sword, but fortunately we got lucky going through this and we beat this level as well. We were really anticipating Regret to be one of the more challenging levels, as it has a boss fight at the end of the level, but honestly, outside of some really boring gondola rides and a nice elevator ride underwater, this level was relatively easy. Upon getting into the area where the Prophet is, there are some more honor guards, but once we got past them, we just had to jump on the Prophet and he was dead in just a few punches. Getting to the level Sacred Icon, this was another level we were unsure on whether it would be really easy or really challenging. And honestly, when we got to the big Sentinel machine, we thought this would be a really challenging thing, but Luke just punched it and then it blew up, so that was pretty easy. Otherwise, the level Sacred Icon is pretty much the same. The slides are still fun, and when we got to the final firefight, this part is another timed section where you have to clear out all of the flood, and what we did is we just waited for our elite allies to kill all the flood, and we just waited. And sure enough, the level beat itself. Quarantine Zone was a little bit challenging just because there's a lot of large vehicles that can shoot and kill you, but it's nothing you can't achieve without trial and error, and pretty much we just drove through it and then rode on the very long gondola ride, and this one was pretty easy to beat without shooting. However, on Gravemind, when we are introduced to the brutes, things kind of start start to change, and we actually faced a real challenge towards the end of this level. But ultimately, the brutes were pretty fun to sidestep and assassinate, and when you get to the end of the level and you have that firefight where the Covenant is at civil war with each other, and you have to fight a bunch of hunters, we were faced with the biggest challenge that we had seen yet, and we actually thought this would be possibly the end to our run. Essentially, in this firefight, there are at least 4 to 6 hunters in this final battle, and in Halo 2, you can't kill a hunter by punching him. We tried punching in the back, the front, the side, the head. No matter how hard we tried, we couldn't figure it out, and we didn't know how we would get past the hunters. We tried throwing grenades at the hunters, and it seemed to do some damage, and while we even tried just sprinting to the end of the level won't trigger the ending cutscene until the final firefight is concluded. So as we went around this level trying to scavenge grenades and find ways to stick the hunters and hopefully kill them, and remind you, there's still a few hunters here, it's not just 1 or 2 hunters stopping us, we opted into trying to go back through the level and scavenge some more grenades to bring to the firefight section once we had gotten all the grenades that were already in that room. And honestly, even then, we couldn't really gauge how effective the grenades were against these hunters. It didn't seem like it was doing a whole lot of damage to begin with. But fortunately for us, as we re-approached the room, all the hunters were gone. They just randomly despawned. So we walked to the end of the level, and the level was beat. And then we get to the level Uprising, super easy. We just drove through the level fast, and we got to the end area. And similarly, High Charity was also super easy. We just walked through it, punched our way through the enemies, did the sidestep on the brutes, and this level was also easy to beat. But the real challenge of Halo 2 is the Just Okay journey, where you have to face off against Tartarus, who is the major boss of Halo 2. Now, if you don't remember Tartarus, essentially he has a shield of invincibility, and pretty much his shield has to be broken before you can do any damage on him just by shooting alone. In preparation for this level, knowing that this would probably be one of the hardest levels that could potentially kill this entire Halo run, we thought that our best bet would be to take a note from a lot of the speedrunners and try to do the Sergeant Johnson duplication glitch, which essentially has you glitch a Spectre all the way to the final room where you fight the boss and duplicate Sergeant Johnson by having him jump onto the Spectre with his sniper rifle. Then from there, in theory, we would have Sergeant Johnson just shoot Tartarus and kill him, as a lot of speedrunners have done in the past, and we would maybe be able to beat this level. However, we spent 6 hours trying to get this glitch to work, and every time we got these Spectres into the final boss fight, Sergeant Johnson would just teleport away and not duplicate. We don't know what we're doing wrong. We want to say that maybe this was patched from the game, but we don't know for sure. Maybe we were doing something wrong, but after 6 hours of trying to glitch the Spectre and get Sergeant Johnson in there to help us defeat the boss, we decided to go a different route. So our next theory was, if we take Banshees and fly it to the end boss, we would be able to maybe glitch it through the room and use the Banshees to knock Tartarus off of the platform, killing him and beating Halo 2. So after a serious struggle of trying to glitch the Banshees through and finally getting the Banshees into the final boss fight, we did learn that yes, you can knock Tartarus off the platform, but he just respawns on top of the platform. So finally, after trying all of these tricks, trying to pick a way that would maybe be effective at killing Tartarus, we decided just to try our luck doing the level regularly. So we jumped out of the Banshees and we one-punched Tartarus and he died. So all of that was for nothing. Well, onward to Halo 3. Sierra 117, while it is a long level and there's a lot of enemies in different areas, it's honestly nothing challenging, especially after getting through Halo 2, which had more challenges. But when you get to the level Crow's Nest, we did find it a little bit challenging to take out the buggers as they fly around and you have to kill most of them before the next room opens. Ultimately, eventually the buggers will settle down on the door in front of you and you can jump up and punch them, but it was still kind of a little bit more challenging than other things we had done. But fortunately enough, the jetpack brutes later in the level, which we thought would be really challenging, were actually really easy, so I guess it evened out. Getting through Savo Highway without shooting is relatively easy. You can always just have a Marine shoot for you if you need to, but honestly, we didn't even need that. The only challenging part is the brutes at the very end. It's kind of chaotic as there's so many of them and you have to kill them all before you can finish this level, but if you sidestep and assassinate or just punch your way through it, you should be okay. Okay, then we had to face the storm, which we thought would possibly be the end to our Halo run, as taking out scarabs usually require players to shoot out the legs, causing the scarab to collapse, then boarding the scarab, killing the enemies on board, and blowing up the battery. Now, since we can't shoot, taking out the scarab legs would be something that would be pretty challenging for any Halo player. Now, the game fortunately gives you some Marines who have rocket launchers who can help you out on the back of your mongoose, except they're really dumb and not effective or helpful whatsoever. And finally, after just walking around for a while, we discovered a weird elevator we had never noticed before that exists there. So we rode the elevator up to the top and then realized maybe if we time it properly, we can make a leap of faith onto the scarab if we're lucky. Luke and I made the jump. I got splattered, but fortunately enough, Luke boarded the scarab and was able to punch the battery, causing the entire scarab to collapse and beating the scarab on that level. From there, we just had to go through the rest of the level, running past enemies or killing them by punching them. And then when we got to the Covenant cannon, all we had to do was throw some sticky grenades up at the battery and we were able to beat the storm. Floodgate is a super easy level no matter what difficulty you're playing it on. And honestly, you can pretty much beat this level on lasso without shooting, so this was pretty easy to beat on easy difficulty. Since we got lucky on the storm, we were pretty worried about going into the Ark, as it would be another level where we had to face off against scarabs later on. But first we had to get to that point. We skipped through the early parts of the level relatively easily, just driving away and running past everything. And as we got to the section where Forward Onto Dawn lands and drops off tanks, we had to clear out the area, and this section was actually quite challenging. We had to throw our grenades at the right time to take out the ghosts, as they definitely were the priority, and the AA wraiths and ghosts are pretty quick to kill you. We just did the best we could to hijack what we could or throw the right grenades, and the next set of wraiths were pretty tricky as well. You had to either hijack them and try to use them as cover while the other person hijacked, but ultimately we were able to do it and have the Forward Onto Dawn land, dropping off the tanks, which we couldn't use. As we finally progressed to the scarab section of the level, we knew that this next part would be pretty difficult, and getting onto the scarab wouldn't be an easy task. We had seen people do weird techniques like brute shot jumping, but ultimately the other techniques involved shooting to begin with. We tried climbing up the building and making a leap from there, and we also tried just waiting around and hoping that the Marines would shoot out the legs for us, which didn't seem like something that was going to ever happen. As we were walking around, however, I did stumble upon a grav lift, and throwing the grav lift at the right time actually gave me enough height to land on the scarab and take out the battery in the back, getting us past this section of the level. The rest of the level was actually relatively easy, as we just had to go through and fight off some more brutes. When we got to the level The Covenant, the vehicle section later in the level was really the most challenging part. Otherwise, it was just running through the rest of the level and grenading, hoping to make it through. By the time we got to the end section of the level, we decided, considering we couldn't use the tank, the best thing we could do would be to take it slow and steady with a Marine on the back of our Gauze-Hog, shooting the enemies the best that he could. We were actually making a ton of progress and it was working really well until we got the Master Chief Collection Special and randomly got disconnected from the game. Then after that, we just said screw it and turboed right through the driving part with an awesome Marine who unfortunately was a casualty to the war. After we split up and took Hornets to the Scarabs, we just timed it the best we could to jump onto the Scarabs and take out our own respective Scarabs, and beating the rest of this level was pretty easy. The next level, Cortana, is mostly a flood-filled level, and since you can pick up a sword relatively easily in this level, getting through this one wasn't difficult at all. And finally, after all of that, we had reached the last level of the Halo Trilogy. Halo, the level that would make or break this entire run, and we knew from the beginning that this level could potentially be a problematic level for us. We never thought we would even get this far to find out. Fortunately, we made our way up the tower. We did the standard out of the map glitch to get in a good position. to fight off the Flood, and after getting through the final firefight against the Flood, we just had to go in and defeat 343 Guilty Spark. And this is where our run got difficult. See, the problem with the final boss fight with 343 Guilty Spark is that the only way you can damage the monitor is by blasting him with a Spartan laser. In the first section of the boss fight, you actually can't do any damage to him whether you shoot or not. It's not until Sergeant Johnson shoots him with the Spartan laser the first time that he is damaged at all. From there, you're supposed to pick up his laser and shoot him 3 times to defeat the boss fight. However, since we can't shoot, we don't have any options to actually damage 343 Guilty Spark. So we assumed we would have had to come up with some sort of way around it. We tried throwing grenades, that didn't work. We tried glitching against his pushback ability he had, which also didn't work. We tried glitching Sergeant Johnson into the final boss fight while still alive to help us kill Guilty Spark, which we couldn't ever get him into the boss fight, but we later learned that even if we had managed to pull that rare glitch off, he wouldn't shoot anyways. He's not scripted to shoot 343 Guilty Spark. We tried running around the control ring. We tried throwing the Spartan laser away so that there was no Spartan laser and maybe it would cause the level to time out or something. And honestly, there was no luck, meaning that after everything we had done, you cannot complete the Halo Trilogy without shooting. And of course, it was a little bit of a disappointment just because we had come so close to completing all of the Halo games without shooting a single shot. And after you shoot the Spartan laser at 343 Guilty Spark, you can continue on and beat the rest of the level without shooting, in case you're wondering. However, the journey getting here and finding out once and for all definitively how far you could get without shooting was one that was really fun. We learned a lot about the Halo mechanics and some really interesting and new ways to play the game that was really fun, except Halo 2 is not fun without shooting. And it really made us look critically at a lot of the levels and look at how Bungie had developed a really awesome sandbox over the years that let you approach things from a completely different perspective. And that was really cool at the end of it all. But what did you guys think? Is this a challenge that you would ever attempt on your own? If you have other challenge suggestions that you'd like to see us try, let us know in the comments down below. We're down to try some things. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe with notifications on because we make a ton of Halo content just like this and you're not going to want to miss what we upload next. We'll see you all next time with a brand new video. Bye guys.